I don't know, it's dark. I'm gonna have to push mute though. It automatically comes on unmuted. Probably dial it.
Are you driving while Zooming, Tina?
So I'm driving to Buffalo. I was supposed to be there already. I thought I was going to do this from the hotel. Can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear us?
Yeah, it still says like waiting, and I can't see your face because waiting's over it, but I can hear you.
Okay, good. Hi, Carlos.
Hey guys,
How you doing?
it's a beautiful day. How you
Hey
doing?
guys, how you doing?
Hi, Carlos. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
Good, thanks. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Everyone's out and about today with the sun?
Not yet. I'm hoping to get out after our meeting, but
Okay, it's over. Let's go.
It's 80 degrees in Buffalo.
oh
that's
my
where I
God.
Oh, how warm is it there?
In the 70s, I would assume. Close
Wow.
to it.
I have to
What do you-
admit, I have not been out today.
So Tina, what are you doing in Buffalo? The college circuit?
Ice hockey tournament.
Ah,
Oh my gosh.
Well, Alan.
She asked Sylvia if she wants to pick her up from school tomorrow.
Is there a lot of traffic?
Traffic or is it easier just to
Hi.
take the bus?
Hi, Claude.
What are you doing,
How
Jeff?
you?
At home,
Hi,
I
Jeff.
only take this.
Hi, Sally.
Easier.
Can't.
Hey, how are you all?
Just
Oh,
tell her,
good.
say, bus home from school.
Hey, Jason, how are you?
Hello. Hi.
Nice to see you.
How
Can
was
we be on
everyone?
your beach?
Yeah. There was some people out there today. It was nice.
I don't know why it still says like.
Clicking the whole change.
Tina, we're hoping that you're not watching and driving.
She is.
I'm trying to look at Waze and I keep going back and forth, but it won't let me mute myself, so I apologize. I have my daughter and her friend and my husband in the car.
I wonder, is there a way, Kelly, can you
Kelly
mute?
Kelly can mute her.
Kelly, can you
Okay,
mute?
because it's still like spinning and it won't let me do anything, but I can see you guys and hear you guys.
You're
Okay.
talented, Tina. Multitasking, huh?
Tina, can you? She is muted. Tina, you're muted, but if you want to speak, just like wave your hand around, okay? Okay.
Sounds perfect.
Okay. We'll see.
All right, so I think the only person that we're waiting for is Manny at this point in time, and I'm sure he will join us. So maybe we should get started. Hey, Jeff, how are you? Maybe we should get started. Thank you very much to the Sport Time team for joining us today. It's always great to have you with us. We wanted to give you a bit of a background as to what we as an ad hoc year-round recreation committee have been sort of asked to look at, and that's sort of the possibility of.
If I can just stop in, could we just have a quick motion to open, a second, and a vote?
Okay. Can
Sorry.
can we have a motion to open our meeting, please?
Seconded.
Who firsted it?
Let's say you did, Sally.
All right, I did. There we go. Okay. So now that we have opened it, okay. So would you like me to carry on? Do you want me to do? Is there another way that you want to do this?
Carry on, please. I'm sorry for the interruption.
That's all right. I'm just not very formal, so I apologize. I should have been a lawyer in my previous life. So we're a committee being put together to work out where we could where we could have year-round multi-sport facility for the residents within the village of Mamaroneck, because they're the people that we are sort of looking after as we are residents ourselves. I think what this meeting is about is more informational. There's nothing that we have, we are just trying to understand more about, what had gone in the past, what would potentially could be the future, so that we can formulate our ideas and then carry on, with recommendations at the end. Jeff and Sport Time team, so this meeting is actually recorded, and that is a Village of Mamaroneck regulation. So every meeting they have is recorded, so it's nothing personal. With that, we have no official mandate. We can make recommendations, but we don't have any official mandate to make anything happen at this point in time. What we're required to do is to put forward recommendations. Kelly, are you fine with that introduction?
Absolutely. Thank you, Sally.
Right. So I think very quickly it would be great just to introduce those people that are on the committee. We're missing one of our members. I'm sure Manny will join us at some point in time. I'm Sally Cantwell, for those that haven't met me before from the Sport Time world. Carlo
Recca.
Jeff.
Hi, I'm Jeff Carpenter.
We have Tina Maresca, who's muted because she's on her way to Buffalo because her daughter has made states in ice hockey, which is very exciting. So congratulations, and we wish you well with that. Also with us today, we've got Jason Pinto, who is the Village of Mamaroneck Recreational Director. Is that the right title?
Recreation supervisor, all the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's that, and then we obviously have Kelly Winstrop, who is our liaison from the Village of Mamaroneck Trustees Board. I'll hand it over to you, Claude.
Well, I'll introduce my group, although I think mostly I'll be doing the talking. So I'm Claude Oken. I'm the President and Chief Executive Officer of Sport Time Clubs, and we've been doing this dance in Mamaroneck since 1999 and actually operating the tennis facility since 2002. With me is Carlos Campo, who has his video off, but you guys probably recognize him the most because he's at Harbor Island every day. And he's our general manager there, and for our other site in Westchester, he's our regional general manager. He's doing a great job with programs and coaches and COVID and everything that he's been up against of late. I have Jeff Crown, who's Carlos's direct supervisor. Jeff's a partner in the company, our company, Sport Time, and a managing director of 5 of our clubs, including both of our clubs in Westchester. So he's been around Harbor Island almost since the beginning. And Ben Schlansky, who's vice president of Sport Time and who's our chief legal officer, and who has been involved with sort of the deal side of Sport Time, the good parts like signing licenses, and the bad parts like litigation. Gladly, that's behind us. So that's Ben, and that's who we are. And if I had known this was going to be recorded, I would have done hair and makeup so I could have looked as good as all of you, but I'm okay.
You have the COVID excuse, that's for sure.
I've worn that one out.
So I think what we, as the committee, all knows that we had put together some questions, Claude, and we had forwarded them to you so that we could frame the conversation, because we thought that was the most helpful for us to, as a starting point. And it would be tremendous if you wouldn't mind sort of talking us through them. And I know you sent us some great material, so thank you very much for that as well.
Okay. Well, I'm sort of sneaky at that email exchange. And have all the members of the committee seen that, or just?
Yes,
okay.
We forwarded. The only person that hasn't is Jason, because Jason just joined us today. We will make sure that Jason gets a copy of it.
Okay. Well, I'll try to sort of illuminate what I already wrote rather than just repeat it. But obviously, if I'm going too fast or if I'm boring you, let me know, and we'll try to make it more fruitful, because we're here to try to help you guys to follow your charge. And if we can be a part of that, we would love that. That's not a secret. Sport Time doesn't want to leave Mamaroneck. We want to keep doing what we've done, only keep doing it better and bigger if we can. And part of the original plan in 1999 that was put out by that by the then Board of Trustees of the Village of Mamaroneck was to add some indoor year-round recreation space to the existing tennis facility, and to upgrade the tennis facility and to deal with some of the issues that existed then, 22 years ago, which included the flooding. It wasn't as bad as it is today, but it was already happening, and some of the antiquated infrastructure, which we've kept patching together. Some has been upgraded, but some can't be upgraded without a major project. So we're in this for as long as we're allowed to be, and we'd love to be the partner that gets to a solution that continues to deliver sports and tennis for generations to come in a forward-looking way. There are challenges to it at the current site, which I sort of tried to tell you everything I remembered and everything I could refresh my recollection on by finding documents. And so I get why the committee is saying, what can we do in the current location, right? So obviously the original RFP in '99 anticipated these improvements and expansion to be at the current site. By the time when we won the RFP and moved forward to try to do that project, which was going to be the existing 8 tennis courts were going to be reconstructed at a slightly higher grade. There was going to be 1 bubble instead of 2 to eliminate a really dangerous snow clearing situation and to make the space inside the tennis bubble a little bit larger. This is what was supposed to be this is what was approved in the original plan. There was going to be a second air structure where that single hard court is, but using the entire area. That was going to be 1 full rink of multi-sport. So that was going to be basically a multi-purpose space inside a traditional hockey rink, not ice hockey, but floor hockey. And in that space, we were going to be able to offer floor hockey, roller hockey, 3 basketball courts, 3 full-size volleyball or 5 practice volleyball, small field soccer, lacrosse practice, etc. Everything you can do in roughly 100 by 200 square foot space. That was all in the original RFP. By the time we were ready to do that, first there was a period of almost 3 years where there was a litigation by the former operator. You guys, some of you may remember back that far. Eventually the village and Sport Time, who were co-litigants, we were a team fighting for the rights of the village and Sport Time at that time. We prevailed in the litigation. The village had the right to move forward and do the project. Sport Time actually received some damages from the previous operator based on the injunction, and that helped pay for the litigation, which was costly. And we were ready to go. But the village by that point wasn't ready to go. It had convened the master planning commission or committee. I forget which C word they used to describe it, but it convened a group of citizens and volunteers and elected representatives who followed this process to sort of reimagine the park over the following decades and figure out what they wanted in the park. And a big focus of that committee, to be honest, was the tennis. It had become politicized way back then. So one of the things that came out of the committee was recommending the relocation of tennis. I don't think so much back then because they were worried about the infrastructure, the challenges I detailed in the letter, like Hurricane Sandy hadn't happened yet. So the new floodplains hadn't been established. FEMA regs hadn't been established. There wasn't really anything standing in the way back then of doing a new project where we sit. The only thing nobody knew about were these 2 effluent pipes. The village was ignorant. They signed an agreement with us where they basically said we had the legal right to build, but they didn't know that there were these 2 easements running under the facility. So eventually we would have had a problem. It never happened because we never did it, but it's just sort of one of those ironies of history. In any event, the planning commission, the master plan had the tennis facility moving by the water treatment plant, sewage treatment plant. And I think the main purpose of that, in addition to getting it to higher ground, was to open up the middle of the park. That was the sort of aesthetic driving force, right? They didn't like these bubbles or other permanent structures in the park. It was meant to be part of a larger plan to have better and more fields in the park. There were problems with some of the fields, drainage problems, there still are. So they wanted an open vista. Some people wanted a band shell. Some people wanted a full-size football field. Different people wanted different things. But if you find a copy of the master plan, you'll see that tennis is relocated and actually made smaller. Traffic flow is really altered dramatically. Boat trailer parking is moved. All kinds of things change. But the main purpose is to open up the middle of the park and reconfigure the fields. We remained involved in this planning process on and off with great intensity. At one point, as I reported in the memo, we actually were asked by the village to run workshops with all the field users, which were run at town hall. In the big room, all the coaches of the teams that were using the fields for soccer and softball and baseball and other fields, other sports, came in, and we did like a matrix schedule of all the users, and we surveyed the users about what they wanted and who needed more time and the seasonality of it. And the idea was to see if moving tennis could increase the amount of usable field space. So we did there was a whole plan that came out of that was constantly fine-tuned, sort of on a stopping and starting again basis. And it made up some of the plans you guys have seen of the new facility at the corner. And part of that negotiation was to see how much of the master plan Sport Time was either willing to or could afford to pay for. So like in our moving of the tennis center to the entrance to the park by Boston Post Road, we were going to reconfigure the traffic and parking around the launching ramp for the day boats, for the trailer boats. We were going to reconfigure the parking for the fishing station. The traffic flow was going to change to be one way. All the fields were going to be reconfigured. In the last negotiation, we were negotiating how much of the drainage work we could do on the fields that don't drain right by the harbor. So this is just all history. Nothing happened, and we're here. I don't know. I mean, if anybody wants to ask questions about why nothing happened, I don't want to editorialize. Sometimes it was because people just didn't want to do it. Sometimes it was because the village, this was becoming a $10+ million project, which never would have worked just as a tennis project. So to solve for it, the village was going to have to be willing to help get low-cost financing through municipal improvement bonds. If Sport Time was going to be on the hook for them, fully guaranteeing them, we had to create a municipal improvement district. Bond counsel was called in on multiple occasions, a gentleman named Ken Bond, who happens to be a bond counsel, which I still find entertaining every time I say it. It's like when I was a kid, my veterinarian's name was Dr. Katz. I thought that was the funniest thing ever when I was 5 years old, because I had a cat. Sorry for trying to do bad jokes. Anyway, Ken Bond came in and we worked with him. Nothing happened. So here we are. If I were you looking at this, I would say, yeah, we should, if the village wants to fix the flooding or mediate it, to upgrade the tennis and to try to have some multi-sport in the park, it would be better off just doing something where we are, because at least based on the track record of the village being able to figure out the challenges to moving the tennis and expanding the tennis at the other location and solving for this plan, a lot of people don't seem to be able to pull it off. Although I do still think it's the best plan. And there's one more reason, by the way, while I have your ear, that moving tennis is the best plan for everyone. There's no way to really do what has to be done at the current site without shutting it down. You can't build all new massive foundations for air structures that are modern, that would be higher above, closer to the floodplain level to drain better, and new bubble attachment points and new electrical infrastructure, and fix the clubhouse footings and build a multi-sport without massive earthwork. There's going to be bulldozers. It's going to be a period where everything is shut down. How long that period would be would depend on how intense and sophisticated the project were. But the longer that we shut it down, or you shut it down, I mean, even if it's not us, the less likely it is that the current business remains in place. Tennis players aren't going to stop playing for 2 years or a year like they did when the bubbles were shut down in 1999 and come back, because there's places to go now. The market's completely different. There's 35 more courts in the market than there were in 1999. So unless the village is prepared to just spend millions of dollars and pay for it, if they expect either their operation in the facility or ours or someone else's to pay for it, it's a pretty scary concept to shut it down for a year or more and then reopen. I wouldn't want to do that today. So that's one of the challenges.
Can I ask a question on that?
Oh yeah,
You mind?
please interrupt me.
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much for that email. And when I read it, that's the first thing I thought about was you went into a lot of great detail about how you would build at the current site. And then later on, you talked about just what you're talking about there, that you wouldn't want the club to be, down for too long, given the competition area. And how is there, do you have anything in mind if we did keep it in the same location and we did modernize it and we did flood-proof it, how would you do it and not be down for so long? Is there a compromise?
Yeah. Well, I don't know yet. I want to believe there's a way to do it, because I want to believe it, because I want it to happen, right? I hope it's us doing it, but whoever does it, I think it should happen. I would want to the solution would be phasing. So we would definitely have to lose an entire outdoor season. It would be impossible for us to rebuild the courts without losing an outdoor season. But I would be hopeful that we could excavate and build new grade beams and do whatever drainage work we needed and whatever footing work we needed, basically between the middle of May and the middle of September in a single year. So we wouldn't lose an indoor season, because if we lost an indoor season, everything would change. It would be a long-term sort of process of restarting everything. And then I would be hopeful that either at the same time or in some parallel process, we could address the multi-sport dimension and the clubhouse. There might have to be some period where there were no clubhouse. There could be a trailer. I mean, this has happened before at businesses and tennis clubs, but it's a challenge, but it can be done. So that's the simple answer, Jeff, is that to solve for the business risks, I think it would have to be a phased project, and kept as simple as possible, which would be good for the total cost too, because once this thing gets above $4 or $5 million, honestly, no tennis operator is going to fund it, because just to operate 8 tennis courts, because it would be a loser. So, that's part of why, if we want to do it fast, sort of quick and dirty, not really dirty, quick and clean, but you get what I'm saying. Less might be more to actually execute a solution. But there are, as I wrote in the memo, and maybe a better way to do this is to have people who read the memo sort of ask questions of interest. There are other substantial things for which we would have to solve. The effluent pipes, one or both of them. I attached a picture of that. I don't know if you guys noticed that it was the only picture I can find that accurately placed the effluent pipes in the multi-sport area. It wasn't a picture of multi-sport, it was a picture of tennis courts. That was another. I can share it if you want for a second. That might actually help. Let me see if I can find it. I had it ready. And let me see if I can share it. So I think you're going to let me share, Kelly. Let me see if I can do that. I hope I can share it.
I think you can, because you're a panelist.
Do you see that, what I just shared?
It said,
Do you see it now?
yes, yes, we're
All
good.
right,
Thank you.
So I'm going to just walk you through a few slides just as a little history lesson. So this is some of these are very, very old technology, like rudimentary. These were things that were prepared 20 years ago. They cost an arm and a leg then. Now the detail is so bad, it's funny. But this was the original plan. Very rough, what I would call site plan, floor plan. So those 8 courts are basically where they are today. They're the dimension that they take up today. That rink is in the area where we were going to construct the multi-sport. I don't know if you can see my cursor sort of floating around at the bottom. Can you guys see that? This little, nobody? Okay, well, anyway.
I
I
can.
I
Okay.
could see it.
So the existing clubhouse is basically only from about here to about here. All of the rest of this was going to be new clubhouse extension. And then the thing I was referencing when I wanted to show you, can you see that now, the black and white sketch plan?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a version that was done sometime between 2013 and 2016, where we were going to rebuild, modernize, and try to solve for some of the infrastructure problems in the current location. But we wanted to stay completely out of the way of these two effluent pipes. So we were only going to add 3 tennis courts. We weren't going to add multi-sport. I wouldn't
What
recommend.
is the active one, by the way? Just out of curiosity.
Jeff, thank you for asking. I thought about this right before we came on. I'm gonna say 90% sure that the active one is this one that actually was constructed to avoid the infrastructure. But
Okay.
I have a 10% doubt, and I wasn't able to confirm it, trying to go through all the emails. So we'll just have, I think that we would be good to go if they never access the effluent pipe that's been abandoned. But there was also a discussion with the county about whether they would be willing to give up that easement, and they said no, that the abandoned effluent pipe is the backup for that it has to be maintained and utilized in various emergency events, and they would never give up their access easement. So the risk would, even if we were willing to take the risk, we would still have to design the site to anticipate that in some unforeseen circumstance, they would come in on a Friday and say, we need to dig up your facility. And we wouldn't want to build a facility where their ability to dig it up would cost us millions of dollars. We'd want to build it in such a way where we could remove as much of the infrastructure as possible and minimize the catastrophic damage, right? So anyway, there are more pictures. I'll show you a couple of more, the ones that I think are relevant. So this, that's not the one. That's the extended clubhouse. Okay, so this picture was designed to show bubble scaling. Right now, there's lots of things about the existing infrastructure that are sort of crappy. The courts are, we do a beautiful job maintaining them. They're pretty. People love playing at Harbor Island for all the reasons you know. It's a wonderful place in a wonderful location. But the courts are narrow to the point of almost being dangerous. And this plan, the original 1999 plan, was designed to take the existing total footprint to the edge of all the existing road curbs and to try to create as much space within the tennis playing surface as possible to make it a little safer, a little bigger, a little easier to maintain. And then also, more importantly, to eliminate a dangerous situation that exists to this day, which is right now, the two bubbles are almost up against each other. So when it rains and snows, all of that runoff goes right down between them into basically a narrow walkway. It's a drainage problem, but it's a much bigger snow problem because the snow, if it's big, it's the bubble. So every time we get a serious snowstorm, especially with windblown snow, Carlos has to, stay up all night with his maintenance staff and with extra people, and we have to hand clear that walkway, and snow comes pounding in off the top of the bubble and slams people. It's just not really a situation that I would recommend anybody live with into the next half century. So this bubble tries to solve for that by covering all of the courts in a monolith. So now the only snow clearing is around the periphery of the bubble. It can be done by machine or blower. It's safer. The challenge is that it makes the bubble, it makes the maximum, the biggest width of the bubble goes from being 120 feet to being almost 200 feet. And so by the nature of the way bubbles must be designed to be safe, the maximum height of the bubble, the high point of the bubble gets 20 feet higher, from about 40 feet to about 60 feet. So that was a problem and remains a problem in working on the current site. I would hate to rebuild the site with, how wide is the hallway, Carlos, the snow clearing hallway? Am I right that it's about 6 feet?
Yeah, probably at most, I would say that, yeah.
5 feet. I would hate to rebuild or have anybody rebuild those courts with new bubbles and new grade beams and leave a 5-foot snow clearing hallway, because I'm not even sure we could get a permit for that, but that would be up to the village, the building department. Anyway, that's meant to show the large bubble. And then this is obviously an old rendering. We thought if we at that time, we thought we were going to build out to the north to have basically a community deck that would look out over the courts. And then to the south, the expansion of the clubhouse to the south would allow for viewing into multi-sport. Anyway, I want to unshare it so I can see you guys. I'm not sure why it won't let me. Oh, I can do it this way. Okay, so that's a little bit of visual imagery. So anyway, we're starting to cover serendipitously or circuitously all the challenges at this site. We have a flooding challenge. We have a floodplain challenge based on the FEMA regs put in place after Sandy. We have the 2 effluent pipes. We have the facility that's laid out in such a way that there's a dangerous situation in between the bubbles. We have the tiny clubhouse that floods and needs to be reimagined in some way. And if we desire to add multi-sport, we need to connect that all together and get it to be a permitted use. So I sort of carefully said in the answers, I still think it can all happen. We did spend a little time and a few dollars hiring a new architect, because unfortunately the architect we had who worked on this for 20 years retired, Jerome Kerner. He really cared about the project and spent a lot of time and some personal time trying to come up with a solution, but now he's just resting because he worked for a long time and it's time not to. So we found a new gentleman who would work with him, who's local, a Tarrytown-based firm who does planning and design, smart guy. And he feels like this could be solved for, because I guess we know a lot more about how municipalities and individuals have dealt with the FEMA regs since 2012, and apparently there's a lot of flex in them. When we first tried to solve for them, like they told us we were going to have to build a breakaway seawall, and we were going to have to figure out a way for the bubble to actually fall down and let water go through in a flooding situation, which would have been millions and millions of dollars of crazy. Within a year after that, that changed, and basically the bubbles could be temporary. They could stay more or less at grade with some drainage corrections. But as I said in the memo, back then, the last time we designed this, we were told that we would have to raise the clubhouse up on stilts 6 to 8 feet above the existing grade, and that we would actually have to raise these ugly, air handlers and blowers and heaters and fans and tanks up on like platforms. And I mean, that to me, that's not going to happen right in the middle of Harbor Island. People aren't going to want to see that. So there has to be a solution that could be done roughly at grade. I mean, I think the facility should come up a foot or two, and that will solve most of the flooding for the next 20 years. And it has to be designed to be cleaned after flooding. But the question really, that would end up being a question between architects, engineers, and the building department and the board, what the village would or wouldn't do to make this happen. Because apparently it can happen. Municipalities, or at least according to our first conversations with our new advisor, municipalities have relatively wide discretion in terms of interpreting those FEMA regs. But we don't, that's all we know. The rest would have to be a process that would be restarted from scratch to find out if a facility could be built, a modernization could take place at the current location that we could get a building permit. It would make sense. All those things I've sort of touched on. And I guess the other thing I had mentioned, for some reason I can't scroll my own email, but the other thing I had mentioned is that I think if we reimagine the multi-sport facility today, obviously we would have to have a whole dialogue again with the rec department and the existing users at Harbor Island, the coaches or the teams or the clubs. But I think we would not do a rink. I think we would not do hockey inline or floor hockey. The demand is way, way down for that. Over the last 20 years, the demand is way, way up for turf sports, and the demand is very high for volleyball. Most of our rink, I mean, we have clubs and programs in these areas, but most of our demand for our multi-sport space is soccer and other turf sports and volleyball and some basketball. So I think the best way to maximize that space, if it were going to become a year-round sports venue, would be to do a turf and or a sports mini fields and courts that could convert into and accommodate all those sports on a year-round basis. But it's big enough basically for 4 mini fields or 1 large practice field, either turf or sport court, depending on, or both, depending on how you wanted to design it. So that would be something that would be, again, something you would sort of build from the ground up.
Claude, do you take down the bubble during the summer in the same way, or would you leave it up for the whole year?
Our preference would be not to. Our preference would be to do a year-round conditioned dome, just because it's so much work for that, and also there's so much wear and tear on the infrastructure, and it's a small venue. It would be extremely busy in Lower Westchester. I mean, people would be playing day and night, all year long, but I mean, it wouldn't really add that much to the park. And it would be better, honestly, to have a venue for rainy days and heat days, and so that. But again, there's always been this tug of war at the village between the village wanting to do stuff there and not being ready to move it, but also certain people being obsessed with the elevations, particularly people who own homes that view the park. So
You're talking about the multi-sport when you talk about leaving the bubble.
Yeah, no, the
Not
tennis bubbles will always go up and down, of course.
Okay.
Yeah. This would be a small bubble in comparison to those.
In your estimation, if you were going to sort of pull a number out of the air, how much would you think this would cost?
Well, as I said in the memo, the last time we were looking at it, one of the reasons we didn't really see staying in the current place is that it wasn't going to be much cheaper than building from scratch because of all of the challenges. If we could reduce the challenges a bit and not have to build as much above and below grade, if we could basically upgrade the tennis courts, install new bubbles, build out the multi-sport, solve somehow for the effluent pipe. I mean, I think we might still be able to do it for 4 to 6 million. But everything's up 50 to 100% since the year during the time frame, mostly because of the cost of concrete and steel, a fair amount of which is involved in this sort of specialty construction. So the devil really would be in the details, Sally. It could easily be just doing the things I said. If we literally have to have massive foundations floating on the water table, if we can't find simpler solutions, it could really get out of hand where it doesn't make sense in the current location. On the other hand, as I said in the memo, if we could find a way to do this for plus or minus $5 million, have a modern tennis center that would stand up well for the next 25 or 30 years, add that multi-sport, then the numbers could work. I mean, a company like Sport Time might be willing to make that investment straight up. We were willing when things sort of fell apart between us and the village, which we still don't understand exactly. We had offered to basically invest up to $8 million on our dime to build the facility at the entrance. But to make that work economically, where we could stand a chance of paying back those funds and turning some sort of reasonable return on equity over the license period, we needed to have a variety of features. That facility was going to have tennis courts. It was going to have a permanent indoor multi-sport gym. It was going to have a permanent air structure covered turf center, and it was going to have a little swimming pool so that we could run basically a sports academy type camp. So those were the features we were willing to invest $8 million in. We were open to negotiation about the features and the design, and still, I guess, still are, to be honest. It still makes sense to me to move this facility, but I just want to do something. If we're involved, I just want to do something that could happen.
And then if, how much would it cost to put the plans together to work out really what was possible, what could be possible, and what sort of would roughly be a timeline to do that?
On the current, you mean in this location, the current location?
Yeah, if we suddenly said, let's, if we wanted to make a recommendation to go back and say we needed to, there needed to be some groundwork done on exactly how much it would really cost to do. And then I presume you'd bring in the architects and you bring in the everybody else. What would the outlay be, cost wise?
I think depending on what we find out and how complicated things get, somewhere between 50 and 100, I would think. But it might, the stuff we would have to know quickly, it won't cost nearly that much, which is why we already just retained the architect once we knew we were going to meet with you. I mean, we have to find out very quickly whether the village engineer or whoever's consulting for the village now, there's been several over time, and the current and whoever is running the building department and the village is whether they want to put their heads together and find a way to do this. If it's legal and doable, that I don't think is going to cost a massive amount of money. I think our architect wanted to just call and start a dialogue, and I said, don't do it. We're meeting with the committee. We don't have any standing really, and let's see who's going to manage the process of restarting the dialogue. Because people have to be willing to have just an open discussion with it. There's no politics now. The village can do whatever it wants, right? But we know a lot. We understand this pretty well. It would go a lot quicker if we could just all get in a room and ask the questions. And the big question is, will the village issue a building permit to make improvements or expansions that some of which will be below the current FEMA floodplain post Sandy? And that's the big question. Is it allowed for under the flex and the FEMA regs? And our architect, who does a lot of projects, says he doesn't know. There's a lot of there's enormous gray, and he would need to meet with the officials and go through the detail of what would be done and what impact it would have. And then the second big thing is the effluent pipes. If we want to use that space to get as much indoor sports facilities as we can for the village to use and for others to use, we have to figure out how we would deal with those effluent pipes. Because you can't build something that would cost $2 or $3 million out of that's poured concrete. It's all permanent, and then have the county has a right to dig it up anytime they want at your expense, which is what the easement says. We would have to find out a creative way to where what they would dig up wouldn't cost $2 million. It would cost $100,000.
Can I, if you wouldn't mind, can I slightly switch the conversation to how you actually manage multi-sports in your other facilities? So, we have Jason who runs the recreation department. And the question is that something, if you've gone into a similar town or village structure, do you work with the recreation department, or are you completely a separate entity? And
sorry, go ahead.
And then can other outside organizations come in and, the soccer people that we have in town, they run the Larchmont Mamaroneck Soccer Club, so they've been looking for this type of space. Yeah. Would they come and rent that from you, or would you be saying, I have the coaches, come to me with my coaches?
So the answer is we would figure it out. We run, Sport Time runs everything that we build and own, right? We're not a landlord. We don't, there, and also it would be a suicide from a business point of view for us to spend millions of dollars building something and then turn it over to a municipal rec who would basically, not produce revenue, because that's what happens. People don't, that's why, to be honest, municipalities do RFPs, because municipalities, first of all, don't generally manage businesses to profitability. That's not.
I disagree. You're wrong.
Okay.
You're wrong. You don't know what I do, so you're wrong.
I
And
didn't
if you look
mean-
at my records over the last 2 years, you're wrong.
I didn't mean to insult you, Jason. And
Yeah, but I just want you to
be.
be accurate. You have no idea what the financials are in terms of what I do, and you're wrong.
Okay, well then and it may well be that you will be running this facility. We don't have a right to stay. So I'm just trying to be honest, but and maybe the village will finally be willing to, borrow $10 million and build something, in which case that would be awesome. And we'll still line up and try to run the tennis facility, because our experience, Jason, is that every time that a municipality has run a tennis facility or does run a tennis facility, compared to when we run it and pay for it, they make more money on us than running it themselves. But again, that might not always be true. It just depends. Right now, in the history of the facility in Mamaroneck, Mamaroneck and Sport Time roughly have split the profits. Right now, we're the facility's down, way down from its peak in terms of its profitability. But right now, we're both roughly making a few $100,000 a year. We're about, we're going to pay about $300,000 a year this year in license fees, and we're making about 300 before any centralized expenses. If you add back the centralized expenses, the village is way ahead. But just to try to answer your question, Sally, without getting Jason even madder at me, because I honestly am not trying to insult you, Jason. We never met before. You may be the best at your job I've ever seen, and I appreciate it. In general, first of all, when Sport Time raises and invests millions of dollars, we have to have the right to try to charge a fee structure that allows us to pay back the funds. And that's what we do. We in the town of East Hampton, the town built a full rink for hockey players in the early 2000s, and it cost them a couple $1 million, and they were losing $160,000 a year operating it, and it needed bathrooms and air conditioning and all kinds of stuff that hasn't been completed. We spent about $500,000 renovating it, and we pay them about $100,000 a year in license fees, and they have no cost running it. So here we did a $260,000 turnaround to the municipality, and we're in the 9th year of that 15-year license. So sometimes we do good things for the cities and towns where we do business. Obviously, at Harbor Island, the village had never received more than $75,000 a year before 2002 from their operator, who we believe was pulling out $600,000 or $700,000 a year. And we've averaged, we've paid the village almost $7 million in license fees. So I'm just proud that we do what we say we're going to do. Doesn't mean we should be the operator, but we could do whatever, but I don't see. I mean, there's one clubhouse, and it would have to be an integrated business there. So if the village wants to run the sports, I mean, I guess that could happen, but I mean, then it would have to really be a village project. I mean, anything's possible, but generally what happens is we build something, or we win an RFP and we improve something, and then we work with all the stakeholders. So like in East Hampton, the biggest demand is soccer. It's either we have a huge Latino population. We have leagues. Until COVID, we had day and night leagues for men and women of all ages. We worked with the town rec department. Many schools came to practice in the facility. the town approves the prices, just like the Mamaroneck approves the prices. I mean, we're not free. It's all a negotiation. But Sport Time in general runs its facilities. That's the question.
You would run the facilities, but the people actually, so the soccer team could come in and rent the space from you
Oh, yeah.
at a fee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how we do business. What I said in the memo that was honest, though, is the only thing we don't generally do is, so let's say we have a soccer academy and we have soccer fields. We love to rent the soccer fields for whatever the price structure is that's agreed upon that makes sense in terms of the investment. And most of the people who rent soccer fields are groups, coaches, schools, clubs. But if we have a soccer academy from 4 to 6 p.m. every afternoon with our own coaches, and maybe that would be something that we've done in partnership with Rec. Maybe the coach who runs the Sport Time Soccer Academy would be the coach who teaches soccer at the Rec camp. But what we're not going to do is have an outside soccer academy come and pay us pennies on the dollar in that prime time spot to run a competing soccer academy in our facility, right? That's just bad business. Just the same, we rent tennis courts to anybody. Anybody can come rent tennis courts, but we don't rent a block of tennis courts at from 6 to 8 p.m. to somebody from another tennis club to come and run a program that competes with ours. I mean, that's just crazy. That would be crazy. That would just be giving up. So that we don't do, but anything's possible.
Anybody else on the committee? Carlo, Manny, Tina, any questions? Or Kelly?
I was going around trying to mute people because I was getting a lot of background noise and trying to figure out where it is. So if anyone wants to speak and you're muted, just let me know, and I'm happy to unmute.
It's a silent group today.
Carlo, somebody's waving. Carlo's
Okay.
waving. Do you see him, Kelly?
Yeah, I do. And Carlo, I think it's saying you need to unmute yourself now. That's what I'm getting.
Got my glasses.
You're good.
Yeah.
You're good.
I'm
Great.
good.
Thank
I'm
you.
in.
Yep, you're in.
So Claude, Carlo Recca,
Hi,
and I've
Carlo.
been down at
Nice to
Harbor
meet you.
Island. I've met you many a times, and I've sat on the rec board for many years, and I sit on that planning board, the commission basically for Harbor Island. So I know all the heartaches basically, and I know the biggest pushback was always basically no one wanted the eyesore, the bubble, and
Yeah,
especially I think it was going to go up 20 feet in addition to where it is today.
right.
And I've told this to the other members on the committee now as well. So there is a lot of history there in reference to a lot of pushback and so forth. And I think we definitely have to have a multi-sport facility there. You run them. I've had 3 sons. I've been to many facilities throughout New York and Connecticut. And I think it would be a more lucrative business for you than your tennis side. Because the one in Mount Vernon, I'm not certain if you know about that one.
Yeah.
And you said the Latinos, that runs 24/7
Uh-huh.
at one point. The colleges use it, basically, the local organizations use it. And it's just, there's a need. But the biggest obstacle we're going to have, I think, from the community as a whole is, again, the same thing. It's going to be another bubble. It's going to be an eyesore. And then, the cost on your end as well. So.
Well, look, there's no question that if your focus is the visuals, getting the monolith of those bubbles out of the center of the park, that the solution is to move the facility to where the Master Planning Commission wanted it moved, right? Because that the scale of there's all that concrete and brick on the treatment plant.
Yeah.
And we have much more sophisticated renderings of how that facility massing would have looked there. Like it almost would have disappeared. Nobody would have seen it. So there's no question. But I just wanted to, I'm sorry, because obviously it was emotional, and I want you guys to at least think we would be good partners if you considered us. There's no, if the quid pro quo for the village of having Sport Time or some other operator pay for and build a facility is that a certain amount of the inventory and of the multi-sport facility is either used by the rec department to run rec programs or somehow jointly managed between rec and sport time to make sure that there are community programs that serve the residents of the village or that serve under-resourced residents. We don't have an issue with that. I mean, just in case anybody doesn't know anything about sport time, we have one of the most, committed tennis charities in the country called the Johnny Mac Tennis Project. And at Randall's Island, where we've invested 20 million bucks and are about to invest another 34 million bucks all day long. Kids come from schools in East Harlem and the South Bronx, hundreds and hundreds of kids a week who from the poorest neighborhoods in the country, those congressional districts in New York where people have nothing, and they play tennis every week of the school year. And that's because that we're committed to those community relationships, and we created an organization to pay for it. And some of those kids get to go in a program called Excellence, and then some of those kids get scholarships. And we've sent 22 kids from New York neighborhoods to 4 years fully paid college through our scholarship program since 2012. So we're like totally committed to not being greedy business people only, but also being community reinvestment people who love kids. So I actually think would be a great partner for rec, but I just want to be honest as a businessman and say, this thing could easily cost $8 to $10 million. And Carlos is right. We used to make over $1 million a year in tennis at Harbor Island and pay the village over $450,000 a year in license fees. Now we make about 350 to 400 and pay about 300 in license fees. So the business is less than half of what it once was because of the competition in Lower Westchester. The big opportunity is sports, where the Lower Westchester is so underserved, and that's what's going to pay for this new facility, no matter who runs it. So, I mean, maybe Jason will run it and it will work, but good luck getting the village to borrow and build, because we tried to do that for the last 25 years. But
That's not what I'm
maybe
saying.
Kelly can do it.
I'm just saying that I think that is some blanket assumption is not accurate. That's all. That was my point.
I agree with you. I mean, I know it's true. I know obviously a good rec director can be a good businessman. So I'm just saying, when we come in, a lot of times municipalities have had trouble, not losing a lot of money operating, and we tend to find a way to fix that. But
But there could be I'm sorry. There
Sorry,
could be a
Carl.
partner. There could be a partnership, though. I mean,
Yeah.
between both parties easily.
Absolutely.
Just having a dialogue and meeting somewhere in the middle somehow. And you're doing it at, like you said, at Randall's Island, with the city of New York and those underprivileged children.
Yeah, well, but to be clear, those are free programs, which I'm all for free programs. I would think if we built a facility like this, we could have free programs during the day. We could have school programs during the day.
Right.
It's what it really comes down to in the business of tennis and rec is prime time, the value of the prime time hours. Okay, that's where the money comes to repay the loans. Is you have to max out your densities and your inventory in prime time. So that we would have to negotiate that in advance is what basically would have to happen. But it can all be done.
As long as you have two willing parties.
That's always the key.
Right.
It's always the key.
Common ground.
And Carlos, Claude, would there be, I know you didn't mention this, has there been any thought to some sort of walking track around the perimeter of the
like indoors?
Yeah.
That's such an interesting question. We designed a facility once that we never got to build, where it was all pre-engineered steel buildings though, but we had a viewing mezzanine, because we love it in our facilities when we can give parents and friends and loved ones a way to view what their significant family members are doing safely from an indoor space. Parents love it. It builds the business. And in that particular place, which was going to be an inner city, like sports armory type place, we were going to have this sort of walk around viewing mezzanine with a track. The problem at Harbor Island is that it's air structures, right? So first of all, all the edges of the site are curved. You have that's a problem. That's why people don't, that's why it's so much more efficient to build fabric frame buildings or steel buildings, which by the way, was what we were trying to do at the other site by the entrance to the park. The main multi-sport building was going to be a fabric frame building with straight sides so that we could use the outside for things like changing rooms and viewing and classroom spaces, all of which are really needed when you have like team competitions and clubs. But I don't think we're going to be able to do any of that at the existing site because of the water table. You just can't build solid steel columns. You're basically designing a building that you're then going to destroy because everything rusts. That's why bubbles work where we are, because when a bubble gets wet, as long as the surface is not damaged inside, you can vacuum it out. And honestly, we don't have flooding inside the bubbles. The only time we have court flooding, the reason we have the DEC problem, the brown material going into the harbor through the catch basins, that's become such a challenge for all of us. Like Carlos has to have staff up all night every time there's supposed to be big rains to run these pumps, because the village hasn't been willing to invest in a system to filter the effluents. So that doesn't happen when the bubbles are up. That only happens in the summer when the rains and flooding washes across the material and washes it out past the tennis court dimension. Which, by the way, is another thing that has to be why this project's important, because there's a problem between the village and the DEC, and somehow sport time is solving that problem right now. But if we weren't there, the village would have to solve it. Carlos can tell you more about what we do, but we basically run manual power pumps that are started manually and deployed manually that pump the water out onto the fields and don't let it go into the catch basins and then wash into the harbor, because it's brown and it's not toxic, but it doesn't look good, and it came to the attention of the DEC. If we rebuilt the courts 1 or 2 feet higher in the green material and installed a channel drain on the low side of the courts, and if everything were graded right, I think we could solve that issue for at least 20 years. I'm not a climate scientist. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we'll be underwater in 20 years, but I don't think so.
So to invest the 50 to 100K that you talked about to come up with a plan, I know you're interested in working with a village engineer. Maybe if you could just walk through what you're looking for to make that investment, because that, to me, getting plans seems like the next step.
Yeah.
No extra.
I think it's just the opposite. I think the first thing we have to do, and I almost don't want to know the answer because I'm scared I'm going to be disappointed, but the first thing we have to do is an architect planner, like one we've hired, who seems to know what he's doing, very smart guy, John Fry, needs to sit with the village engineer and the building department and just explain to them, just remind them, refresh our recollection about the situation. We would have to excavate, we would want to build a new grain beam X amount of feet higher, but still 4 feet below the current floodplain. That would be considered a temporary structure because it would be air structures, but then we would need to fortify the clubhouse and expand it. That would be an expansion of existing use. We can't fly it on stilts. We can't fly giant, ugly air handlers on stilts. Here's how I read FEMA. What do you guys think? And they would just have to look at the code. And that would cost almost nothing. That would cost maybe 10 hours of, us paying an architect. So that's a few $1,000. And the village saying to the building department and the engineer, we want you guys to have the discussion. And the committee can be involved. I mean, this could be public. And I think people would decide pretty quickly whether there was a fish to fry here. And then on the effluent pipes, I mean, there's a bunch of letters. There's been a whole correspondence between the village and the county on the effluent pipes. It was all handled by Rich Slingerland, when he was the village manager. I have most of the correspondence. It's obviously in the files. And again, that would be something that would just, that the current village manager would just have to review the history and again, decide if the village was willing to try and negotiate with the county to solve for those effluent pipes. I mean, the other thing, of course, is we could, some of these solutions can be had by just rejiggering things a little bit. And that's another question. Like, we could definitely build more, if the village really decides it wants indoor sport, year-round indoor climate controlled sports and wants a little more space, right? It's a matter of looking at the current field configuration, looking at the effluent pipe, looking at the current roads, and just solving for it. But there hasn't been that degree of flex in the system so far. We were going to be allowed to go basically to the existing curbs to get as much space as we could. The problem is that space took us over one of the effluent pipes. So I don't know. Again, I would want my new architect who does a lot of planning and seems to think he can solve to work with the village and see if he could. We're willing to spend that money to pay pay our guy to talk. You're right, Jeff. If we then thought, okay, we know more. The court should be in an elevation of +3. The clubhouse should be at +4. We're going to have to do some drainage. Then obviously we start spending money by just trying to do plans that execute that solution, and then we have to price those plans, and that costs money. And that's where I think we could spend 50 to 100. But I don't think we even have to decide that yet, because I think it would be crazy to draw up plans if the answer is no way. You cannot build one more. If we can't build one more square foot of clubhouse that's not 8 feet above the current grade, and if we can't replace an air handler without putting it 8 feet above the current grade on the platform, I don't think anybody on this call honestly thinks that we can do a new or modernized facility here. That would basically mean, because we designed it, we have hand sketches. Once we were going up 8 feet, we decided we'll go up 10 feet so that the area under the clubhouse can be a sheltered area for like camp and activities. But I mean, it was going to be a massive thing floating in the middle of the park. And when we came to the board at the time and said, guys, I know you want a solution in the current location to avoid having to make a decision about the master plan or spend money towards it, but are you really going to approve a 60-foot bubble and a clubhouse on stilts? Everybody said, no, that's not happening. Let's go back to the plan we can actually do, building a new facility at the entrance. And we were in favor of that because of our fear about closing down the existing facility to construct. So it's all honestly connected. And we were getting more sports facilities at the new location because it was an oddly shaped location. So we were able to do 180-foot by 95-foot rink with extra volleyball, basketball courts, and changing rooms in a fabric frame building to the north along the entryway. And then we were able to do a dedicated turf bubble slightly to the south and slightly to the east. And it was just like a lot more for Jason. There was a lot more to get rather than that tiny little space that was only there. The other thing, of course, that we could do if Sport Time were your partner, but you could do it with somebody else, is we could build a tennis facility and then we could build a turf facility over it. We could build a seasonal turf facility over an existing field. And we talked about that with the board. The problem with that is that you have to then have a artificial turf field. You can't put a bubble or a air structure over natural grass. It becomes a mud bog. So at the time, people were very scared of artificial turf. I think, and as I think those concerns are largely a thing in the past. They make it completely differently. There's no outgassing. You don't have to have rubberized pellets. Like, you can basically have green artificial turf now in 2021. So there's a lot of ways to solve this, guys. And Sport Time would love to solve it. And we'd also love to be partners with the rec department. We think we're the best partner for the rec department. By the way, Jason, pickleball. That's something too that there's tremendous demand for. That's a rec department driven sport, but where sport time can actually also make a profit and have fun. That we should have pickleball too in the village. There's tremendous demand.
Yeah, so Claude, that's in our capital plan, not for Harbor Island, obviously, but for a different park to
Mhm.
build, because we get, I say,
Oh, Jason, you've
Multi-
frozen.
I'm frozen.
Can
I
anyone
hear
hear
you.
Jason?
No, I can hear you, Jason.
Good for me.
Everybody's
And I-
frozen.
Figured out how to unmute myself.
Hello?
I hear you. I hear you, Jason.
I can hear
Is
you.
anyone there?
I think
I
we
think
lost
I
Kelly.
think Kelly's frozen.
Kelly,
Anyway.
it's good. Yeah, Kelly's frozen.
Anyway, so
Where are
Jason,
you
how many?
building pickleball, Jason?
We're thinking about Stanley Avenue Park. It's in our capital plan. There's a big patch of grass there to put 2 courts. Because we get a lot of, from the
Request.
senior population, we get a lot of requests for pickleball, a lot. And sport time, you guys don't have it at your place. Otherwise, I would normally,
Yeah.
because people call for tennis all the time, so we send them to you in terms of like organized. But
Well, honestly,
pickleball is very popular.
well, what made me think about it, honestly, if we wanted to max out the current location and answer the year-round turf demand, a cheaper, more cagey way to do it, and this might solve for some of the planning, would be to use that little or multi-sport area, not including anywhere that is covered by an effluent pipe, to add pickleball, and then take a field and build it out as a indoor-outdoor turf center, where it goes completely back to the teams and coaches during the 8 warm weather months, and where 4 or 4.5 months a year it gets covered by an air structure. And that might solve for all the issues.
That's an interesting concept very interesting concept to do it that way. Yeah.
Can I ask a question? This is Tina. I finally figured out how to unmute myself and have arrived at my destination. Am I understand, like, I'm not sure I understand. So is it still possible to move the facility to where the plan was, or you can't do that anymore because of those pipes?
No, it's absolutely possible to move it. And in fact, that's where we spent all the money, almost $200,000, as I recall, designing. We ended
Okay,
up designing.
And it would be bigger if you did that.
Yes,
correct?
yes.
Okay. And so
Well, yeah.
the other thing that I'm kind of stuck on is we keep saying partnership, but
Yeah.
I feel like the only way it would be a partnership, and correct me if I'm wrong, is if the village funded some of it, correct? I mean, obviously, if you funded it all, you need to make your money back. You are a business.
Well, it just, sorry.
The way it is right now, it doesn't give access really for Jason to do anything. And the thing that bothers me is it's not affordable for everybody. And that's what recreation in a village is supposed to be. I know you guys do offer scholarships, but those scholarships are very little, and it doesn't cover everybody, because like a middle income family doesn't qualify for a scholarship, but yet they can't afford to be coming to your club either. So like that's the thing that would concern me the most. So I think that in order for it to work, it would have to be a partnership, and the village would have to fund some of the project.
Well, what the things you just said are very important and also very complicated. I'm not aware that we don't really have anything right now that would be co-managed with rec, unless what you're saying is rec should be managing tennis, and it should be it should be priced so cheap that anybody can play, in which case, it costs about $1.5 million to build one indoor tennis court. So it's just, and I've been in the business since I'm 11 years old, and I can tell you that tennis is about 20% the cost, or 25% the cost today in the whole real dollars, adjusted dollars, that it was in the 70s when the boom hit. It's not, you can play tennis for the same price as going to the movies, but it gets you're right that it's a lot of rich people or wealthier people, because instruction adds to it, and there's a lot of, if it becomes a lifestyle, it becomes expensive. There's no question about it. Sports is different from that, obviously.
Yeah,
and I understand that and I respect that. Like you do, if you're paying all of this money, you obviously need to make your money back, and that's the way it works. But
I guess it,
I feel like Harbor Island then is to me not the right place for this, because that is the center of the village's recreational facilities, and not, I love the concept, and trust me, like I just drove 6 hours to Buffalo for ice hockey. So I am a sports person. My 3 children are all in sports and would love to have something like that in our village. I just don't think that I think the village needs to invest in it as well.
well, I guess I would just urge you to be open to, really looking at the details with us or with yourself. The village negotiated very hard when we made our first deal in '99 to deliver basically free summer outdoor tennis to the community. And those memberships are cheaper now than they were in 1999. Basically, village residents and seniors pay nothing to play tennis out, virtually nothing to play tennis outdoors. What you're really saying is that your belief, and I'm not sure I disagree with you. I just don't know if it works in the reality of America. Your belief is that indoor tennis, if it's in a municipality, should be, if not free, affordable. I don't know that exists anywhere in the United States of America. Virtually nowhere, maybe 1 or 2 places. It doesn't exist because it's economically infeasible. There's no municipality who's going to spend $1 million or $2 million a tennis court to build, plus cost of operations, and and if they charge enough to just pay the cost of operations, it's not that much less than what we're charging. It's just.
I'm not talking about just tennis the way it is now. I'm referring to making. Right. I would love to see it made bigger and have a turf field or a sport court for people to play on. And I mean, the other thing that came to my mind is we do have a very strong soccer program that I'm actually on the board of, and the same for youth lacrosse, and I'm sure they would love to use it too, but we already have it in place. So like it would almost seem like you'd be competing with it the way you
not
described.
Necessarily. It would just be a matter of figuring out whether the pricing it depends when they would want to play. It depends whether they're paying more somewhere else or the same. I guess it depends what you mean by partnership. So I don't want to pretend. I don't want to debate you about the philosophy. I don't have a problem with the philosophy. I mean, I get that these public-private partnerships around for-profit businesses are, some people feel that they smell wrong. But of course, they only smell wrong if they are wrong. You have to look at the details, right? If a city is running an outdoor skating rink and charging, $20 per session and losing $500,000 and the rink is falling down, and then some private company who just does skating comes in and invests $5 million and charges $22 a session, and it's better, then that's a good partnership. But if the company who comes in and invests money basically bars all the working class families, and all I can tell you is the reason I run a tennis company is because my parents were teachers. It was 1970s. They were building tennis courts all over New York, and they couldn't afford to get me lessons. And so I went to work at a tennis club when I was 12, and I've been doing it ever since. And I can promise you that, working families gain access to our clubs, but you're right. They don't have an equal chance at having as much access as people who can pay the full ride. It's a smaller group that gets all these scholarships and stuff, but I think these partnerships work. There are municipalities who are much bolder about borrowing and bond issues and building. That some of them. That's really what I was trying to say before when I was disrespected Jason unintentionally. I'm just saying there are a lot of these that I can give you the addresses of a lot of municipal facilities that where the municipalities are still paying off the bonds, And after they built them, they gave them to the YMCA, they gave them to operators because after they built them, they were losing massive amounts of money. And municipalities have a very hard time setting fair pricing structures because basically nobody wants to pay the municipality. So that's why they do these partnerships. I don't know whether they're right or wrong morally. All I can tell you is when Sport Time's the partner, we try to make them win-wins. We try to make families happier and healthier. And I think we do, but the devil is in the details.
Thank you.
And Claude, I completely get it. You have to, there's a happy medium in what I do in terms of generating money and taking care of our residents.
Right.
My priority number one and what the village employs me to do is provide access to all 20,000 of the residents as best as I can and as affordably as I can. But at the same time, we know how to make money when we can make money. And if that makes sense, I mean, things are run very inexpensively for certain groups that service our kids and our adult population. But at the same time, we charge an excess fee if someone wants to come out at 10 o'clock at night to do an adult basketball league or whatever it is. So there is a medium there. And I think what Tina's getting is she just wants to make sure that our 20,000 residents are able to still be able to go to such a beautiful facility like we want to all have, which ultimately is the goal. Right.
Well, here's why I'm jealous of you, Jason, because when you run a program or a venue, right, and you not only service people in an egalitarian way across your village population and beyond, because I know lots of people, even at Sport Time and elsewhere, so many people use the village facilities who aren't from the village, right? I've sat in town in village board meetings just about the launching ramp. I mean, I know the village. So, but when you get to say I'm profitable, nobody says to you, oh, but Jason, you're profitable, but you have to now look at the annualized debt service on the $1 million it costs to build that thing. So that's the difference, right, between the challenge of the rec director, where the municipality either owns it or builds it and doesn't charge it off, and when we do a build out, we have to cover the costs. So it's a little different. But to Tina's question, is there room to make it a true partnership? I think there's room to make it a true partnership. I really think there are ways to do it. I don't think joint operations works for the whole facility. I think joint operations of like a venue, like if we had a turf venue and we agreed that as part of the license, the rec department was going to have 25 hours a week for free community programming, and we were going to have a low-cost camp that was, promoted across the village, run by Sport Time and rec department coaches. We can do all that. We have done all that. The numbers just have to work. That's the biggest challenge, because things cost so much to build now. The way that I'm glad Kelly's back, because the way that we wanted the village to be our partner so that we could do things like give scholarships and give court time and share field space was the village can build stuff and pay 1.5% over 30 years for the money. And Sport Time, when we build on municipal property, we have no collateral, because the minute we finish building something, it's owned by the municipality. Okay, we don't have a leasehold mortgage. We don't have chattel. So if we go and build an $8 million facility at Harbor Island, or when we built a $20 million facility in New York City, the day we opened the doors, the city owned it, and we had nothing except our right to operate it for the license period. It makes it impossible for us to borrow reasonably. So our average cost of funds to do a municipal facility probably is about 10%. So for a long time, we were going to go, because one of the mayors in the village signed a letter agreement with us saying the village would help us finance to reduce the cost as long as Sport Time guaranteed the payments to cover that financing. We had a dance for years and years about whether that was going to happen, and it never happened. But to Tina's point, it is a lot cheaper for the village to build a facility than for Sport Time to build it. The village can do it with municipal improvement funds. Although there are limitations, somebody's reading. There are limitations. I don't know if you know aware of this, Kelly, but the village borrowed a tiny amount of money to approve Harbor Island Park a very long time ago, like 1968. And it was federal grant money. And there are all sorts of restrictions, perpetual restrictions that they signed on for that federal grant money. And there's no way to get out from under it. And that's one of the reasons have never been able to look at building any permanent structure, because sometimes permanent structure is cheaper and better in the long run. But this federal grant money prohibited the village from ever building any permanent structure in the park. All of the existing parkland at the time had to remain open land. So the only things that can go up in the park to enclose recreational space are either air structures or a fabric frame building that's considered to be temporary in nature. So there's that as well. Like, even if, what I'm really saying, Jason, is that even if the village wanted to go and issue 10 million of bonds tomorrow and build you a turf barn, they can't build you a turf barn at Harbor Island Park. They have to build you a turf bubble or a turf frame structure. We only learned that about halfway through this long history, and it shocked us, as it shocked the village manager and attorney at the time. But there's also history on that, just so you guys have that in your file.
That's news to me.
Yeah, I can send you the letter. It was fascinating.
My apologies. I lost internet, so everything shut down here, and I assumed that you had all shut down as well. So I'm glad that you're not, and
Kept going.
we'll see.
I apologize, but I have to run to another Zoom because it's like Zoom Thursday.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to make sure that anybody else had any other questions for Claude and his team.
Claude, before we close, I just want to really sincerely thank you for taking the time to do this, and to thank your team. This new committee is a continuation of what we did with the old committee, and as you can see, we've added some members of the non-tennis recreation interest areas in the village. And so part of this is bringing them up to speed, and part of this is just moving the thought process forward. And I know this is a lot of repetition for you, but I thank you for your patience and you're just providing this informative way of helping us all along. Thank you.
Well, I thank you guys for having me, and I think you can tell the passion I have from Mamaroneck. I mean, I'm not just a business guy. My cousins grew up on Seney Avenue. I started coming to Mamaroneck when I was 3 or 4. I played at the park every weekend, once or twice a month when I visited them, the Livingston family, and I played at Harbor Island on the red clay before the bubble. And I remember when the bubble first went up, and we've worked hard to try to make a happy ending. It may not be one, I hope it is, but Carlos obviously has lived there for the last decade, made so many friends and helped so many families, and Jeff has supported him, and as Ben supports him with me. So the people on the call do care about the village and about the facility and the business that we run there. And we're transparent in saying we don't want to leave. So, and we think we're great partners. We're open to whatever the partnership becomes based on the kind of things Tina has just discussed. I have enormous respect. At one point, the current mayor said, well, he just doesn't believe in licenses, they're bad. And I'm like, I'm not going to argue with that. I mean, that's a perfectly legitimate point of view. Some people just don't believe that municipalities should be doing deals with businesses. I think, I probably agree with that in most areas. In some areas, they have to, right? Not municipalities can't do everything. And in some areas, it just works better. I think we're a really good tennis operator. Now pickleball, also sports and camps and turf. We do all those things. We have the best, we coach the best tennis playing kids in the state. We coach the best playing girls in the state. We care about kids. I think we could be a great partner, whatever partner means. In the end, it's about the numbers have to work. That's the hard part. And the other hard part, obviously, is this friction between doing something simple where we are, where there are all these obstacles, maybe even legal obstacles, or imagining this big project that just can never quite turn the corner. but they both could happen. I hope. I don't know about where we are. It would be good to figure that out, and we'd be happy to pay a few dollars and volunteer a little time to be part of figuring that out. That would be that would be the logical next step. Because if it can't happen, if nothing can happen here, then you know that that fact is a fact, and then you consider what the alternatives are. But we don't know that, I don't think, at this time.
I think that's right. Thank you. I also didn't want to be remiss and leave out Jason Pinto. I know, Jason, that you are beyond busy. It's budget season in the village. And so I really appreciate you making time to sit in on this. And before Sally closes it out, I never thank you committee members as much as I should. So I really appreciate the time you're all making to continue to work on this for the village. I really, really sincerely appreciate it. So thank you all for being here tonight.
Nice to meet you all who I don't know already. Jason, nice to see you.
Thank you.
Carlo, nice to see you again.
Yeah, likewise. We'll talk again, I'm sure.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much, everybody. Can I get a
Thanks,
motion to
guys.
close the meeting?
Motion to close?
Second.
Sure.
Thank you, Colin. Anyway, thanks very much, everybody. Appreciate it sincerely, Claude. And everyone be healthy and well. Thank you.
Thanks,
Great
guys.
week.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
Stay well.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.